the college fella out at Castock and Dolphin with the Albert Mules, and while we smoked, we were able to look over the wall at genuine paper bulls in the Pope's garden next door. Not many are given that privilege of looking at a real paper bull. So you can understand what it all meant to us. I think that you couldn't ring home. Letters would take so long to get to and fro back in those days. So in a way we had to go back, or not fall back, we had to go back to one another to make the bonds that were, of course, the bonds of family, the strength, confidence, warmth and comfort we customarily drew from our families in far off Australia. Some of us were there for only 4 years, others up to 8. I was only there for 6, and it was a long time. But our lack of contact with people of our own age, that we could, as it were, relate with in the sense of having a past, of either sex, incidentally, that I think was a deprivation in some senses. But all I can say here now is that you and I formed a friendship which rapidly developed, and I think it surely stemmed. There's an old Latin saying, cor ad cor loquita, heart speaks to heart. And in Dick and myself, that happened. Heart spoke to heart, and heart has spoken to heart for 60 years and still does do tonight. Now, thank you, but I'm sure you haven't finished.
Just warming up.
Now, we did become brothers. We were about 40 different nationalities, different cultures. And that, I don't want to use words like brotherhood and so on, God helps me, nudging the mafia. But I'll give you an example of that brotherhood. There was a little nondescript bloke in the year below us. He was an abbot, and from Iraq. His name was Deli Karim. Now this little nondescript bloke is now the Cardinal Archbishop of Baghdad, the Patriarch of the Chaldean Church. I don't know whether he's still a little nondescript bloke. All I know is a very simple thing, that Frank Little, who met him in Melbourne, Frank was the former Archbishop of Melbourne, told me recently that he met Deli when he came out to consecrate a church of his Chaldean rite, and Deli told him that he has one almost sacred act each day before he goes out, and he goes out at about 11 o'clock, and he leaves his desk completely clear to make sure that his successor will be able to take the job over. Now, I think that's important to understand that the brotherhood that was formed with people like Deli Karim and many, many others was a very precious thing, and we remember tonight. I think that we sometimes confuse a civilization. You think about it reaching its highest point in objects. Its art, its language, its literature, its music, buildings, also in its food. We have an example tonight, obviously, of a civilization expressing itself in food. I want to say to you that the highest point of a civilization is found in its people. And there's an Italian word to express that. It's a simple word, civiltà. And it wants to express this thought. But I reckon that any attempt to define the word is bound to fall short. If you look at the dictionary, you'll be told that it means civility or courtesy. But there's much more in civiltà than that, because it implies dignity, delicacy, generosity, a sense of the appropriate, and forbearance, but not of the foolish or the perverse. Now, I could enlarge on the concept of civiltà further, but it's enough to say tonight that in Dick Connolly we find the high quality of civiltà in abundance. We all know that Dick has been graced with many gifts: family, schooling, seminary in his Roman years, arts degree at Sydney University, a flair for languages, Latin, Italian, high level, French as well as English, depthness of expression, speech and writing, an insatiable thirst for more and more knowledge, which is partially quenched by reading across a wide spectrum from French literature to model ecclesiology. At lunch today, we were eating a very fine rice salad, and Dick and I, we discussed the writings of René Girard. Dick put forward the view that Girard's book on the scapegoat, read better in French than in English. I didn't argue about that. I'm just giving that as a simple example. Incidentally, I said partially by quenching his thirst because the imbibing of the finest of wines, which the Australian vineyards are able to provide, and especially that, and I wrote this, Peter, before I knew you were going to be here, much less that I'd sit opposite you and take you out for a fag. Dick has so frequently quenched his thirsts with those wonderful wines of the Barossa and particularly the Shiraz. Most of us, of course, will connect with music. I'll speak about that in a moment. I just want to say that in his time at the ABC, and especially when he was head of ABC Drama and Features on radio, Dick's responsibility ranged across a world of culture, including the great Latin authors, contemporary figures in the intellectual world, both of Europe and Australia, and it proved to me, I think to thousands of others, that in Dick we met a Renaissance man. Yeah. In any event, through his leadership of the ABC, millions of Australians were enabled to drink from the headwaters of European culture and were thereby immeasurably enriched. Dick, remember, was never content unless he could also introduce us to the great makers of our own culture, poets, musicians, intellectuals and others of that kind. We know how much music has meant to you, Dick. I learned when I sat next to you at the university in Rome through hours of at times frequently boring material taught to us in Latin. I was aware that Dick sitting next to me was using his time more usefully. He was away in another world playing the finest music of one of other of our great composers in his head. Whereas I was trying to take some notes from the Latin, and I with very great regret would say, I'm sure Dick used his time better. However, we all know that one of the most successful hymn-making teams of the 20th century was that of James Macaulay and Richard Connolly. I can't speak authoritatively, I'm going to quote from someone more confident than I am. He, Dick, is the composer of some of the most loved and best known contemporary hymns of the Church. In churches all across the world, the music of Richard Connolly, wedded to the words of Australian poet James Macaulay, form an essential part of the hymn books of a number of denominations, Catholic, Anglican and Protestant. I'll repeat, in churches all across the world. Now we all know, and look at it, I hope that they forget, that in so many churches music that is more appropriate to some kind of a hillbilly gathering in Kentucky is what's served up. Nonetheless, the good, the true and the beautiful will ultimately win out. We saw it this afternoon in the chapel and it will continue to do so. In another place I found how Father Ted Connolly brought some verses of James Macaulay to Dick and suggested he set them to music. It then said Connolly had done very little composing, but he tried his hand, producing music which complemented the muscular, I'm going to be unhappy here, the muscular, even martial imagery of the hymn. Now that was the hymn, Help of Christians, guard this land from assault or inward stain. Let it be what Christ has planned, his new Eden where you reign. And then the author said, and he made me very uneasy, he claimed that the hymn, Help of Christians, would become the battle hymn of the Catholic Rite. Now, I disagree with this judgment if it in any way implies that you, Dick, were ever a partisan for one side or another in the tragic conflict that upset the equilibrium of church and state in Australia in the 1950s. And the way it could be expressed and nurture through hymnology was ever your preoccupation.